They needed 67 votes to get a 2/3 majority. And when Senator Byrd brought it to the floor, he got 68 votes, one more than he needed.
Hi, this is Lynn Widmeyer, and today our topic is the Panama Canal. Why the Panama Canal, you may ask? Well, I'm going to tell you. First of all, the Panama Canal Treaty, which turned over the operation of the canal to the Panamanians, was signed while Jimmy Carter was president of the United States back in 1977, and we've just lost him recently. Secondly, the Panama Canal Treaty made its way through the Senate thanks in large part to the leadership of Robert Byrd, our own West Virginia senator. And I'm wearing, you might not be able to see him, but I'm wearing birdie earrings in his honor. And third, the Panama Canal has been back in the news because President Trump has said we need to take it back under United States control. I am here today with Ray Smock at the Robert Byrd Center for Congressional History and Education here in Shepherdstown to talk about these events. And I can think of no one better to speak about this. Ray is a resident scholar here at the center and the university and is director of the center. Ray is the author of many books on Congress and the presidency. He served as the historian of the U.S. House of Representatives for, I think, like 13 years. Written many books and articles about Congress and the presidency, and we're not going to go into those because I've only got like 10 minutes, Ray. So people can Google him. So let's just start off right away. First of all, thank you so much, Ray, for joining me. And tell us a little bit about the Panama Canal.
The Panama Canal was something that was actually started by a French company back in the 1880s, and they went bankrupt trying to build that canal. And then fast forward to 1903, the United States, under President Theodore Roosevelt, decided to get into the canal.
And that is a classic picture of Theodore Roosevelt sitting at one of those great earth movers.
Yes, yeah, and of course, there was no country of Panama at the time. Panama was a province of Colombia. So basically, the United States instigated a coup with the help of the French, who were trying to recover some of their money. It's a complicated tale, and we won't tell all the details, but it started out with basically gunboat diplomacy. We fomented a revolution there. Panama was created as a country, and then the country agreed to have the United States build the canal. And it was an 8-year process.
Phenomenal.
And they finished it up in 1914. It was the largest engineering project in the world up to that time, mainly because it's a different kind of canal. The Suez Canal was built earlier. It's 120 miles long at sea level. But when the canal in Panama had to be built with locks, so the ships have to go into a lock and be raised to a level because you have to basically going over a mountain range and coming down the other side. So it was a much more complicated engineering feat.
And we, in 1903, the first treaty was signed that gave the U.S. canal rights in exchange for financial support and for military protection of Panama.
That's right.
That was 1903.
Yes. Yeah, it was a monetary deal and also a deal that the United States would be a military zone for the United States to protect the canal. In the 1950s, there was considerable agitation down there and more revolution, more troubles. Largely it was over the canal, and some of the rebels there were attacking the canal, impeding shipping. So the idea then was to stabilize that area. And so over a 13-year period, almost as long as it took to build the canal, 4 different presidents of the United States, starting with LBJ and then continuing with Richard Nixon and Jerry Ford, and finally Jimmy Carter. The idea was to develop a treaty system that would guarantee the United States had access and rights, but also that would make the canal a neutral canal, neutral from any other country's control, and it be Panamanian. And there were 2 treaties that Jimmy Carter and Robert Byrd, and also Howard Baker, the Republican leader. They worked to come up with a way to protect the canal, never give up America's rights to defend the canal, but to guarantee that the canal was neutral. And that's what they did. And those treaties were passed in 1977. At the time, it was greatly controversial.
Oh, yes.
Senator Byrd was the most popular senator that West Virginia ever had. And when he had an election, he almost never lost a single county in the whole state. But at that time, sentiment was running so strong that we were giving up something that's American. And that Americans built it, Americans died for it, and Americans should have it. That's a slogan from Ronald Reagan, who was running against Jimmy Carter at the time. So Reagan was running against the canal to differentiate himself from Jimmy Carter. Of course, once Reagan was elected president, he didn't bother with the canal anymore. And no president has since then.
I do remember reading one of Robert Byrd's statement, because the treaties was a bipartisan deal in the Senate. And I remember Robert Byrd reading that he was so appreciative of Howard Baker, his Republican leader, who worked towards getting this done because it was the right thing to do. And the two of them worked together in a bipartisan partnership to get this done.
That's right. Getting the treaties through the Senate was a miracle. And imagine getting 2/3 vote on anything in the Senate today. So it was a challenge. And Senator Byrd held up. He was majority leader at the time, and Howard Baker was minority leader. So he held up the treaties for months because he wanted to make sure that when they were brought to the floor of the Senate, there would be enough votes to pass. They needed 67 votes to get a 2/3 majority. And when Senator Byrd brought it to the floor, he got 68 votes, one more than he needed. And so the treaties passed. There was continued controversy about whether this was a good idea. Byrd got a lot of hate mail. It's the only time in his career that he got terrible mail, and they called him a traitor to the United States. People said they'd never vote for him again. There were lots of petitions that were sent in. By the time the treaties passed, it was about 50% of the public thought it was a good idea, and 50% still thought it was a bad idea. But they got enough of support so that a lot of senators in both parties thought it was a safe thing to do. And of course, it did stabilize the canal. There's been no trouble down there since. The United States gave up complete control in 1999 under the first treaty. It was all Panamanian. After that, we kept control for 20 years after the treaties were signed. And then, since then, there's been no trouble. If we went back and tried to take that canal, that would cause all kinds of trouble. And what Senator Byrd found when he went down there and visited the canal was protecting that canal would involve tens of thousands of U.S. troops on regular duty down there, because this is a 50-mile long canal in jungles and in difficult terrain, and with a 5-mile wide stretch on each side. So altogether, it would be a nightmare to try to actually have troops down there. And there's no need for them as long as it's in Panamanian control. And yet we can go in if we had to. If there was trouble there, the United States, under those treaties, could still go in and defend it.
Well, so now you alluded to this. Let's fast forward some 50 years later. President Trump has declared that this is a topic of interest for him. He's concerned about the rates Panamanians are charging.
Well, I don't know where he gets that. The charges are set by international arrangements with shipping of every country that goes through the canal. It's a huge thing. And it's about the same rates that are being paid at the Suez Canal. He doesn't seem to be bothered by Suez traffic.
This seems to be a big issue for him.
Yes, I hope it's just a campaign issue like it was for Ronald Reagan many years ago. And once he's in office, he will move on to other things. It's still an amazing engineering feat. It takes a lot of maintenance. It takes a lot of upkeep, constant dredging, constant improvements. Recently, a Chinese firm, a Hong Kong holding company, built a $1 billion bridge over the canal. And I think that maybe led President-elect Trump to say that the Chinese are running the canal. Well, it's international investment in the canal. The canal is a marvelous, peaceful use by all the countries that do shipping, and just like the Suez Canal is. So I hope that doesn't become a
Well,
issue.
I think we'll keep an eye on that. I want to thank you for that. But before we leave, do you have any updates or whatever on what's going on here at the center or at the university in terms of your work and interests?
Well, the Byrd Center is here primarily as an archive.
Earrings.
They're cute.
They are cute.
We have Senator Byrd's papers here, extensive files. We have other West Virginia representatives here. We have basically an archive that has about 75 years of West Virginia history and national history at the highest levels. Senator Byrd working with presidents. He worked with 11 presidents, and he said he worked with 11 presidents, not under any of them. Separation of powers being important to Senator Byrd. So it's a facility that's archival. We also have an auditorium. We do public programs related to government and politics and the Constitution. And every year in September, we have a Constitution Day lecture.
Well, I think I would suggest you might want to do a little program on Senator Byrd and the Panama Canal now that it's back in the news.
If it stays in the news, we'll do that.
Well, thank you so much, Ray. This has just been delightful, and I'm going to keep my eye on the Panama Canal, I guess, along with Greenland.
Well, that's another story for another time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry.